everyone. Great to have you all with us. I'm your host, Nugwa Haruna. Have you always wanted to start investing, but keep putting it off for a later day? A later day, by the way, that seems to never come around. Well, that's a familiar story for many Canadians. A survey by TD found just 1 in 10 people said they were comfortable investing on their own. They reported feeling too nervous, overwhelmed, and intimidated to start. And consider that this survey was from 2019, before the global pandemic, market volatility, and high inflation that we've seen in 2022. So, many Canadians who aren't investing might feel even more anxious about it now. Yes, they can be a lot to learn at first, and it may be tricky to set aside money to invest regularly, but the benefits can be enormous over time. Case in point is today's guest speaker, Michelle Hung, founder of the Sassy Investor. Michelle found herself thousands of dollars in debt coming out of school, but now boasts a 6-figure investment portfolio that continues to grow. She credits some helpful money management and investing habits for turning her financial life around. And we're going to hear about them in our conversation today. Michelle, great to have you here. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
Super excited about our conversations. And I actually do want to ask a question. So you've written 2 books on how to get started investing. What inspired you to share your story and spread the word about financial literacy?
Several reasons, actually. For one, during the time I was working in corporate finance, one of the most common questions I was always asked was, what should I invest in? So I realized that not many people out there know how to invest. Eventually, I looked back and realized, wow, like so many people don't know how to invest. And, this urge to spread the word about, financial literacy became more apparent as I went through some life events. For example, I lost my full-time job. Around the same time, my long-term relationship ended, so I was pretty much divorced. And I was very glad that I was in some form financially prepared for these life events. So there were several reasons why I chose the path to help people with their personal finances and investments.
All right, so I can't wait for us to get into that conversation. But before we dive in, I have a trivia question for the members of our audience. And the question is, if an investor started with $5,000 and earned an average return of 5% per year, how much money would they have after 25 years before accounting for inflation and taxes? Stick around until the end of our interview to find out the answer. All right, Michelle, you got off to a rocky start with your financial journey coming out of university. So can you share some of those experiences with us? You just talked a little bit about a couple of those and how you were feeling about your financial future at the time.
Absolutely. So I started my career after I graduated from university in 2008. So at the peak of the global financial crisis, which was just unfortunate timing. I couldn't find a job in corporate finance like I wanted. I had a dream of being an investment banker on Bay Street, but it just wasn't happening for me early on. And I also had the attitude that accumulating debt was fine because I would have a full-time job right out of school. I learned the hard way that my freewheeling spending was just poor. It was just a bad decision. And it was definitely naive of me to have the expectation that a job was waiting for me upon graduation. I was roughly $30,000 in debt, and naturally this made me very stressed. So I had to tell myself, and for, I guess, anyone who's out there that's feeling stressed about debt, this situation is temporary and it's just a matter of the actions taken upon yourself to make sure you don't stay in that situation. So that's what I told myself. And eventually I found a minimum wage job, full-time minimum wage job, so I could start getting cash flow in the door to start digging my way out of the financial hole I was in and eventually start fresh again. So that was my first step out of this hole, was bring in cash flow.
All right, so you started on a path to turn your finances around, and you credit your success to some helpful habits that you adopted. Eventually, they helped you build a 6-figure investment portfolio too. So the first habit is one that you started before you even invested a single dollar, and that's setting a monthly budget. Why was this so important for you?
This was important because, I decided like I needed a plan, a debt reduction plan to help turn things around. So that's why I created a budget for myself. I needed to see the numbers for myself because for the longest time I was just avoiding it. I was scared to look at that. And it's just a terrible way to go about your finances. So I had to see like how much I needed to be putting towards my debt each month so I know when roughly I would become debt free. And so it was a way for me to keep my eye on the prize and stay on track. It felt really empowering to start paying off debt as soon as I got my first paycheck. That was like one of the best moments. I also used some of my money to invest in self improvement, getting into shape at the gym. This way, I was physically and mentally feeling good, which I found it was super helpful when I was studying for my CFA exams. It helped me, stay motivated and stay focused. So I basically just put my head down, studied, worked out, went to work, and eventually everything just came together and, everything just worked out at the end. So I feel it's really important to make a budget before and any investing can take place because you can't invest money you don't know you have available. So what I would do is I would write down my expenses each month so I could get a clear visual of what money was coming in and where it was going. And at the end of the day, even though I was in debt, the act of having a plan and working towards something made me feel a lot less stressed about the debt I was carrying. And I was happy knowing I was moving forward and that things would only get better from there on out. The feeling of progress is so key.
I love that you talked about taking care of your financial health as well as your mental health, right? So ensuring that you are working out to make sure you are still balanced. So that's actually great. Thank you for sharing that. So sticking to this idea of creating a budget, how did you go about doing that?
So these are the steps I took to create my budget. The first thing I did was I had to tabulate what I owned. I didn't own a lot coming out of school, but that's okay. And what I owed, which were the liabilities. So the next step after writing down what I owned and what I owed is how much I made, my income, and how much I was spending. So my expenses, including debt repayment. And lastly, I had to decide what I wanted to do with my money, which were my goals. So I created a spreadsheet in which I plotted down my fixed expenses like rent and utilities, phone bills, and then I made sure to save a couple $100s a month towards savings by treating it like a fixed expense. This helps guarantee savings. The rest was a mix of additional debt repayment and discretionary expenses like entertainment. So I was adamant on paying down the debt. And because I worked a lot, I didn't have a lot of time for discretionary expenses anyway, which worked out at the end of the day. But everybody's priorities and desired lifestyles are different. This is just what I decided to do. The most important thing is to strike a sustainable balance between saving, later on investing, and the life you want to live. Just make sure to save something. Even a little bit of savings moves you towards your goals.
Right. And I know that at TD, we actually have a tool available that investors can use to check out what their cash flow is. So there's a cash flow calculator as well as a net worth calculator, because you talked about, finding out what your
Mhm.
assets were, what your liabilities were, so how much you're actually worth. So there are tools available to the self-directed investor. You talked about, having different kinds of debt. So we carry different kinds of debt that can make it tough to save money. So how did you figure out which debts to pay down as soon as possible versus others that you could carry while you were saving and later investing?
I generally think it's a smart idea to pay down consumer debt like credit cards, personal loans immediately because they often carry higher interest costs. So for those reasons, I work to pay off my credit card debt first. They carry the highest interest rates, and my student debt off last because the rates were lower and the interest expense was tax deductible. After I got the corporate finance job I wanted, I was able to accelerate my debt repayment. And once that was paid off, I was able to focus on investing.
So once you had your budget established and your pressing debts paid off, you started investing. That's when your second habit came in, paying yourself first. What does that mean?
Paying yourself first just means, setting aside a dedicated amount of money each month, much like, as I mentioned before, paying your fixed expenses like rent. That way, you only spend whatever is left over on discretionary things like entertainment, and you don't feel guilty because you know you're setting aside money for savings. That's already done in the background. You don't have to think about it. And those little bits of money over time can make a huge difference. So I personally set aside 15% of my net income once I was free from consumer debt. I automated the transfer of this money into my savings and investing accounts, which was really simple to set up. And this way, again, I would avoid the temptation to dip into my savings for impulsive purchases. It's really important to separate your savings from your everyday spending account.
Investors who utilize a TD direct investing account, they can actually set up something called a monthly contribution plan. So then that way, like you're saying, it goes out before you see your paycheck. So you're not spending first and saying, oh, now I didn't invest anything, right? Okay, so how did you stay motivated to stick to your budget and continue to pay yourself first when unexpected challenges and expenses would come up?
So I wrote down like the North Star reason I wanted to invest and build wealth over time. I'd reflect on that reason and on days when I would kind of struggle to keep up with my good habits. But I'd also just go back to that feeling during that time when I was unemployed, had no cash flow, had no savings, and I would keep reminding myself that I never want to be in that position ever again. I would review my short-term goals. Short-term goals are anything within 3 years, and long-term goals are beyond 5 years. That mattered deeply to me, and that also helped me stay focused. So it's like, what do I want? When do I want it? Stay focused so I can achieve those. And inevitably, there would be times when unexpected expenses come up, which would force me to dip into my disposable income and my savings. When that happened, I would make sure to replenish, boost my savings in subsequent months to make up the shortfall as much as possible. And one good habit I had was I was constantly reviewing my numbers. So I would immediately open my spreadsheet, plug in money as soon as I got paid, and I would update my numbers, including like the debt repayments and investing goals. And of course, I would immediately go into my accounts to actually pay down the debt or invest the money that just went into the account. So this was my way of keeping my eye on the prize and seeing those debt numbers go down or my savings and investment accounts go up. And I also made it a point to celebrate when I would hit goals by treating myself. And I think it's really important to avoid resenting the journey of saving and investing. So occasionally I would treat myself to a nice dinner out or manicures and pedicures at the salon. Those were my favorite treats.
I love it. So you're not feeling guilty about, when once in a while you do spoil yourself, there's no guilt attached to it, right? Because
Exactly.
you've mapped it out in your goal.
Exactly. You
Um,
deserve it.
And you also mentioned something really important. You mentioned separating long-term versus short-term goals. And I completely agree that, having these financial goals to work towards can help investors stay motivated. So with that in mind, I wanted to pause our conversation to show our audience how to set up an investing goal in WebBroker.
In WebBroker, click Goals. Once there, click Get Started. The Goals tool lets you create a goal and track your progress in meeting your goals over time. We'll start off with selecting why we're investing, and we'll select My Money to Grow. Once here, we'll choose our current age, how much we're looking to have, as well as our target age. Finally, we'll name our goal. We're able to save and continue. The next step gives us an opportunity to choose our investor profile. We're able to view the details of each profile in details by clicking See Full Details. This gives us an idea of what the asset mix is, as well as what the historical returns over the last 15 years have been for portfolios that held this asset mix. Once we've decided, we go choose profile and then save and continue. Step 3 lets us choose the account we're looking to track our goal with. We're able to put the amount we're looking to get started with, as well as how much we're looking to contribute to our goal and our contribution frequency. In this case, we're going to choose monthly. We're able to save and continue. Finally, we have an option to review our goal. We're able to see what our target age is, the amount we're looking to have, how much we're looking to contribute, as well as how often we're looking to contribute. On the right side, we'll see what our goal is, as well as what our projected amount will be in that time frame. We're able to make changes to our contribution limit by clicking the plus and then clicking recalculate. Once done, we're now able to see, based on an increased contribution amount per month, how much we will have when we are 35 and how much closer we are to meet our goal. Once satisfied, we're able to start with this plan. And we can always review our goal by going to our dashboard.
Okay, hopefully that demo helps our audience get started with their own investing goals and understand how to adjust their paths to reaching them as needed along the way. And speaking of adjustments, high inflation has been a big concern for many Canadians in 2022. How have you changed your budget to keep investing even as inflation eats into your savings?
So one of my biggest costs has been gas for my car. I cut down on driving a lot. So before the pandemic, I would drive 30 minutes to my soccer league games 3 times a week. And so I would have to fill up my tank at least more than once per week. So let's just say every 6 days I'd have to fill up. So what I did was I had to find closer venues to play soccer to save money on gas. I got a bike so I could bike to my soccer games instead. So that way I was able to lower my expenses without sacrificing my lifestyle. Okay, I still get to play soccer 3 times a week. I haven't really changed my investment plan per se, but because the markets have dipped, I see it as an opportunity to invest even more than usual.
Of course, there's only so many expenses a person can cut. So that brings us to your next habit, starting a side hustle to earn extra money to invest. What sorts of extra work did you use to help pad your wallet?
So personally, a side hustle was almost necessary to keep up with living expenses and invest adequately. So especially living in a high cost of living area like Toronto, I highly encourage having multiple streams of income. Side hustles are so good, are just so good. So some of the side hustles that I've done in the past. I was a freelance writer on Fiverr. I advertised helping people write complaint letters to corporations. So it was kind of fun, very amusing for me, and I was able to earn a little bit of money. Market research participant. I've done many of those. I got paid using certain apps to perform tasks like filling out surveys or being a mystery shopper or participating in focus groups. So those focus groups actually pay cash immediately after. So those are really nice. I was an extra in a few commercials, like in the background. And also because I had specific skills. One time I auditioned to be a soccer player. And that one commercial paid me over $6,000 for one day of shooting. So if you have talents, be on the lookout for commercials that require specific talent. They pay very nice. And another thing that I did was pet sit. I would bring my laptop with me and work remotely while I watch someone's pet for the day.
I love how you just showed how one individual has the potential to have a number of different side hustles, right? Because as you mentioned, these are side hustles and they are
Mhm.
helping in terms of with your cost of living. So thank you for sharing that. All right. You worked out your budget and had money automatically transferring into an investment account. But before you could invest, you needed to understand what sort of investor you are. So, how did you figure that out?
So, I guess going back to my early investing days and how I got started, my eldest cousin, he was my investing mentor, and he told me to read books written by investors like Warren Buffett and Peter Lynch for guidance. And those investors stress the importance of long-term investing in real businesses with stable economic modes, which are just competitive advantages. So investing was all about having a long-term mindset and the attitude that you're owning a business, you're buying a business. So some of the key questions I asked myself to figure out my investor profile was, how secure do I feel about my employment income? How would I feel if my investments fell sharply? And how long will I be investing? How long will I be investing for? And a key factor is your age, because this theoretically gives you a longer time horizon to invest. Generally, younger investors can afford to take on higher risk because there's lots of time to make up for declines along the way. And but on the other hand, for older investors, typically they care more about preserving their money for retirement, and they may want to take on less risk and focus on income producing assets. So I knew I would be investing for longer than 20, 30 years, and I was comfortable with maximizing my risk and hopefully my returns as well. So I can do this because I'm very comfortable with seeing my portfolio fluctuate in value. However, again, everyone has a different risk tolerance and investing time horizon. So you have to understand yourself first and then build an investment plan around that.
Right. So it's just showing that on that journey to knowing what kind of investor you are, you might try different investing strategies, but it is
Mhm.
important to know what your investment plan is. Okay. So once you figured out your investor profile, the next habit you picked up was developing and following an investment plan. Right. So what did that look like for you?
So I personally try to keep my portfolio as simple as possible by holding a few diversified products that cover a lot of bases. I also do have individual stocks in my portfolio as well. With that said, this is just my personal approach based on my investor profile. Each investor is different and must decide what mix of assets makes sense for them. So the important thing is to do research, do your own research, and understand how diversification into many different geographies and asset classes may help even out the performance of a portfolio over the long term. And this is because some asset classes may help offset losses in others each year. I personally pay careful attention to the fees the products I invest in may charge, and try to find the lowest cost alternative. So, for example, if an investor had a $100,000 portfolio earning an average of 3% per year for 25 years and paid 0.5% in fees, they would pay a total of $24,000 in fees and see their money grow to roughly $185,000, not including taxes. However, if they pay 2% in fees instead, they would pay about $81,000 in fees and see their money grow to roughly $128,000. Again, not including taxes. That's a difference of about $57,000 in fees alone. So these little things can add up to a lot of money, and people may not be they may not be aware of that, but it's something, it may seem very minor, but it can add up to a lot of money down the road.
Some investors like to invest a large chunk of money at once, whereas others like to invest bit by bit. What's your approach?
In my opinion, time in the market beats timing the market. This just means, in general, it's more effective to remain invested rather than trying to buy and sell at market peaks and troughs. I know a lot of people try to time the markets. And of course, it's ideal in theory, like just, buy low and sell high. But even professional investors have not been able to do so consistently over time. So that's why I personally prefer dollar cost averaging, which is investing a set amount of money at regular intervals, either every 2 weeks, every month, or every quarter. Okay, so I would take that money I was saving and automatically transfer it into my investing account and just consistently buy and hold investments as soon as the money lands in my account. So this allows me to put my money to work right away. So it's not just sitting there earning nothing. And ultimately, I build my position little by little in investments. And I believe in investments that I believe will increase in value over time. So depending on the investment chosen, some pay income like a dividend or interest payments. So I make money while I wait to see how my investment performs. And of course, the compounding effect of earning returns on my investments each year and reinvesting those profits can potentially be very beneficial over the long term.
Right. And that's where the idea of the power of compounding comes into play, right? There's that snowball effect of, a little more adds a lot more, which adds a lot more on there. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Sometimes the markets can get wild and tempt investors to make drastic decisions that deviate from their investment plan. You credit part of your success to tuning out the market drama. So, how do you keep your emotions in check?
I had confidence, I still do. I have confidence in my investment plan and felt I was making sound decisions that aligned to my investor profile. So I wasn't as tempted to veer from it during market turbulence. Markets go up and down all the time, okay? But my intention is to cash out my investments much later in life. So I'm not too concerned with the short-term fluctuations along the way, just where I ultimately end up. And I've been investing for over 10 years. My portfolio has grown so much. And because I see that, I know that I will continue with my investment plan. And when I look at the declines in the investments, I make as they're like, I see it as a sale, and I get to buy more of them at a cheaper price. So this is often referred to as buying the dip. But again, you should do your own research to better understand why the dip occurred to make a more informed decision. So remember, you don't lose money until you sell your investments for less than what you bought them for. Patience and time are your best friends. I actually made an investment contract, it's in my book, with myself to avoid panic selling at the first sign of trouble or, getting too greedy and taking on too much risk. So in this contract, it's just a few pointers for myself to keep in mind, which are, resist the temptation of taking hot investment tips from friends or colleagues. And certainly don't take, tips from random people, strangers on forums or on social media. I would only invest in something that I understood. If it's confusing, I stay away. Education is key when it comes to investor confidence. And of course, building a diversified portfolio helped me look past the ups and downs of individual investments or asset classes.
All right, we're going to leave our conversation here, Michelle. Thanks so much for showing us some ways to get our finances in order and start investing for the future. I'm sure it's a relief to many new investors in our audience that investing doesn't have to be complicated or intimidating. Now, before we wrap up, let's share the answer to our trivia question. As a refresher, the question was, if an investor started with $5,000 and earned an average return of 5% per year, how much money would they have after 25 years before accounting for inflation and taxes? And the answer is the investor would have $16,932, more than triple what they originally invested. That compares to a return of just $6,412 if the $5,000 had been left in a savings account earning 1% annually. So, Michelle, let me know what you think about it. This ties to the idea of, that power of compounding we talked about, right?
Yeah, the power of compounding, the power of putting your money to work and optimizing your finances. And this is all passive passive growth because it's one of the few ways out there where you get to make money while you eat, while you sleep, while you go about your day and you're at work and your money just works for you. So this is just an example of how much growth you can have with your money. So investing is super important. And of course, everyone should be involved with their money like that.
Thanks again for joining us, Michelle. And for those of us in our audience who want to continue their learning, make sure to sign up for our upcoming webinars. Plus, check out our extensive library of past sessions in the Learning Center on Webroker and on our YouTube page.